Matthew Evans, a man accustomed to luxury and control, sat behind the wheel of his sleek silver Mercedes, the air conditioner barely keeping the oppressive Kentucky heat at bay. His thumb tapped rhythmically against the steering wheel, betraying a rare impatience. The sprawling comfort of his mansion felt a world away as he found himself stranded on a desolate road, a flat tire grounding his meticulously planned day. Calls to roadside assistance had proven futile, each failed attempt tightening the coil of frustration in his chest. Just as he resigned himself to waiting in the simmering silence, a figure appeared in the distance, a boy, no older than 14, ambling down the sun-baked road. The boy's faded t-shirt and worn sneakers hinted at a modest life, but his stride carried an unmistakable sense of purpose. Matthew watched, curiosity mingling with unease, as the boy approached. The boy's gaze locked onto the car with a discerning eye before he nodded politely. "Got a flat, sir?" he asked, his voice calm and assured. "Yes," Matthew replied, an odd mix of relief and discomfort swelling within him. "I was hoping for help, but my phone's got no signal out here." The boy offered a small, self-assured smile. "I can fix it," he said simply, crouching by the tire without hesitation. "My grandpa taught me last summer. Got a spare?" Matthew gestured to the trunk, watching as the boy retrieved the necessary tools with practiced ease. The boy's hands moved with an efficiency that seemed almost out of place for someone his age. Matthew, who had long surrounded himself with professionals and paid expertise, found himself humbled by the boy's quiet confidence. As the boy worked, Matthew stood awkwardly to the side, a spectator to a scene that felt strangely intimate. His mind wandered. When had he last fixed anything with his own hands? The boy's diligence brought with it a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, a longing for a simpler kind of competence, one unbound by wealth or status. In mere minutes the task was done. The boy stood, wiping his hands on his jeans, and offered a modest smile. "All done," he said. Matthew, eager to show his gratitude, reached into his wallet and pulled out several crisp bills. "Here," he said, extending them. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." The boy shook his head, stepping back and raising a hand in polite refusal. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need anything. Just happy to help." Matthew stared, stunned. The money hovered in his hand unclaimed, as he watched the boy turn and walk away, his silhouette shrinking with each step down the dusty road. Alone once more, Matthew slipped the money back into his wallet, an unfamiliar heaviness settling in his chest. The rest of the drive home was quiet, but Matthew's thoughts were anything but. The boy's calm resolve lingered in his mind, a stark contrast to the transactional world he had long inhabited. That night, as Matthew sat in the opulent solitude of his study, surrounded by rare books and untouched luxuries, the boy's image haunted him. The worn sneakers, the steady hands, the refusal of payment, it all spoke of a dignity that money couldn't buy. By morning, Matthew could no longer suppress the strange pull to find the boy again. It wasn't mere gratitude. It was something deeper, something he couldn't name. Driving the same stretch of road, he asked at diners and gas stations, until a cafe owner finally offered a clue. "Sounds like Elijah," she said. "Lives with his mama over in Harlan." An hour later, Matthew arrived in Harlan, a modest town nestled in the Appalachian foothills. He followed vague directions to a small house on the edge of town, its sagging porch and mismatched shingles a testament to resilience rather than decay. Steeling himself, Matthew knocked. A woman in her early 40s opened the door, her sharp, kind eyes taking him in. "Can I help you?" she asked. Matthew cleared his throat. "I believe I met your son yesterday. Elijah, right? He helped me with a flat tire." Her face softened with recognition. "That sounds like my Elijah," she said with a proud smile. "He's always helping folks." She invited Matthew inside, where he was greeted by a home that, though modest, radiated warmth. Family photos adorned the walls, and hand-drawn pictures hinted at a younger Elijah's artistic streak. It was a far cry from the sterile elegance of Matthew's own house, yet it felt alive in a way his mansion never had. In the backyard, Elijah was repairing a fence. He looked up surprised. "Hey, mister," he said, wiping his hands. "What are you doing here?" Matthew felt an uncharacteristic nervousness. "I wanted to thank you again," he said. "You helped me when I really needed it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." Elijah shrugged. It wasn't a big deal, but to Matthew it was. He offered to help the family, but Elijah's quiet integrity reminded him of values he'd forgotten. As the boy's mother stepped onto the porch, the encounter promised a lesson Matthew couldn't ignore. The soft rustle of fabric broke the silence, as she wiped her hands on a worn dish towel. Her voice carried through the air, warm and inviting. "Elijah, you'd better come inside and wash up before lunch," she called, her gaze shifting to Matthew. Her eyes softened, and she added, "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Matthew hesitated, the offer catching him off guard. Invitations like this weren't part of his world, but the sincerity in her tone left no room for refusal. "I'd like that," he said finally, following her into the modest home. The kitchen greeted him with the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted vegetables. Though the table was small and surrounded by mismatched chairs, it was arranged with thoughtful care. Matthew eased into a seat, his tailored suit feeling oddly out of place amidst the cozy setting. Elijah, his ever-present smile in tow, washed his hands at the sink before joining them. As they ate, the boy's chatter filled the room. He spoke of school, his friends, and his dreams of one day becoming an engineer. His mother chimed in with stories of the close-knit community, pride evident in her voice as she described neighbors who looked out for one another. Matthew listened enraptured. For all his wealth and achievements, his own home felt cold and empty compared to this one, brimming with warmth and unguarded connection. After the meal, as the plates were cleared, Matthew turned to Elijah's mother. His voice carried a rare tenderness. "You've done a remarkable job raising him," he said. "He's got more heart than most people I've met." She smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you. He's a good boy. We've had our struggles, but we've learned to appreciate the small things." Matthew nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. He couldn't just walk away. This family had unknowingly given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a glimpse of what truly mattered. Driving back to his sprawling estate, clarity washed over him. This wasn't about charity or pity. It was about honoring the strength and selflessness he'd witnessed. Elijah and his mother deserved more than patched fences and worn furniture. They deserved stability, recognition, and hope. The next morning, Matthew sprang into action. He made calls, dozens of them, to colleagues, contractors, and suppliers. By midday, plans were set in motion. Within a week, trucks and workers descended upon Elijah's home. Matthew stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, directing the renovations. Elijah and his mother watched, disbelief etched into their expressions. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling as workers unloaded supplies. "We've managed fine on our own." Matthew turned to her, his gaze steady. "You've done more than manage. You've thrived. But you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. Let me give back." Elijah, uncharacteristically quiet, stood beside his mother, his face contemplative. Matthew knelt slightly, meeting his eyes. "You taught me something, Elijah. Helping people isn't about money. It's about showing up. And I want to show up for you." Over the next several weeks, the house transformed. The sagging porch became sturdy, the leaky roof was repaired, and the rusty swing set out back was replaced. Inside, walls were painted, floors polished, and the kitchen outfitted with gleaming modern appliances. Elijah, ever curious, couldn't resist watching the workers. One day Joe, a burly contractor, noticed the boy's interest and invited him to help measure planks. Soon, Elijah was peppering the crew with questions about tools and techniques. His excitement was contagious, sparking laughter and camaraderie among the workers. From a distance, Matthew watched with quiet pride. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something truly meaningful. Elijah's boundless enthusiasm reminded him of his own youthful ambition, long buried beneath boardrooms and business deals. As the final day of renovations approached, the family stood on the new porch, marveling at their transformed home. Elijah's mother turned to Matthew, her voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore. It's a home. I don't know how we can ever thank you." Matthew shook his head. "You already have. You reminded me of what life is supposed to be about: family, connection, and purpose. I'm the one who should be thanking you." On the last day, the neighborhood gathered to celebrate. Freshly baked bread, jars of jam, and potted plants were offered as tokens of goodwill. Elijah's laughter rang out as he showed his friends the swing set and brightly painted rooms. Matthew leaned against the new porch railing, sipping iced tea Elijah's mother had offered him. "You've done more than fix a house," she said softly. "You've given us hope. And maybe you found something for yourself too." Matthew nodded, a rare smile gracing his face. "I have," he admitted. "I spent years chasing what I thought mattered: money, status, influence. But none of it feels like this. None of it ever filled me the way this has." As the sun set, the three of them sat on the porch, watching the sky shift to hues of gold and deep orange. The warmth they shared was more than the lingering heat of the day. It was the warmth of gratitude, connection, and newfound purpose. When it came time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mother walked him to his car. The boy's wide grin and his mother's tearful smile stayed with him as he drove away. This wasn't the end, Matthew realized. It was the beginning of something far greater. For all of them.